All right, so are you ready to dive into something really trippy this time? You guys sent us down the rabbit hole of the simulation hypothesis, which is basically, are we or are we not living in a simulation? We've got excerpts from this paper called Who's Pulling Our Wires that lays out all the arguments and like a ton of extra reading at the end.
Yeah, it's definitely a question that people have been thinking about for a while, like philosophers, scientists.
Okay, so let's break this down. The idea that reality isn't what it seems, that's not new, right? I mean, the paper even mentions Descartes and that whole evil demon thing way back when.
Right, Descartes was already, back in the 17th century, he was already thinking about, like, what if our senses are lying to us? So his evil demon idea was, what if some powerful being is messing with our heads, making us experience a world that's not even real,
So like the ultimate VR prank.
basically? And the simulation hypothesis is kind of like that,
hmm
except instead of a demon, it's like super advanced computers making our reality.
And what's crazy is like this isn't just some fringe theory anymore. The paper even said that Bank of America analysts gave it like a 50% chance we're in a simulation. Even bankers are like, maybe.
Yeah, it's definitely become more mainstream. I think part of that is we're using simulations more and more in our world too. Like video games are getting so real, AI is getting crazy. We even use simulations in science all the time. So the idea that maybe our whole reality is a simulation doesn't seem as like out there as it maybe used to.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder, why go through all the trouble of making simulations? Like, what's the point?
Well, one of the big thinkers on this is Nick Bostrom, and he's got this really interesting argument. He says, if in the future civilizations get advanced enough to make what he calls ancestor simulations, which are like detailed recreations of their past, then statistically it's more likely that WE are in one of those simulations than in the OG reality.
Hold on, so you mean like future humans could be simulating US right now?
It's kind of a wild thought, right? Think about it this way. What if those future civilizations create tons and tons of simulations, like millions, billions of them? Then for every real universe, there are way more fake ones. So just by probability, it's more likely we're in a sim than the original.
Okay, but wouldn't it be like insanely complicated to simulate a whole universe, like down to every single atom?
That's where the idea of partial simulation comes in. The paper uses this analogy I love. Think of those huge open world video games. They look super detailed, but to save processing power, a lot of the faraway stuff is basically just like a compressed image. All the detail only loads when you get close.
So like our reality could be super high res up close,
Yeah.
but all the distant stars and galaxies are basically just a cosmic screensaver.
Exactly. And as long as the simulation is good enough to match what we can actually see and experience, we'd never know the difference.
That is so wild. And the paper talks about other things too that make people wonder if we're in a simulation, like maybe paranormal stuff is just like, oh, glitches in the matrix.
Yes, some people think that things we can't explain, like glitches in time,
Hmm.
or like precognitive dreams, or even deja vu, maybe those are just signs that the simulation isn't perfect.
But I mean, those could also just be our brains messing up. We don't have like hard proof that they're glitches in a simulation or anything.
True, it's all just speculation at this point, but then there's also the idea that the universe itself might be made of information, which kind of fits with the whole simulation idea. Like if reality is just bits of data at its core, then it makes more sense that you could simulate it.
Okay, so we've talked about why we might be in a simulation, but I know there are arguments against it too. So, what are some of the big problems with the simulation hypothesis?
Well, I think one of the main criticisms is that it would be so complex to simulate a universe like ours. I mean, think about it. You'd have to recreate every single galaxy, star, planet, all the way down to like the tiniest particle, plus all the laws of physics that make them work. And then there's the whole question of consciousness, which is a huge mystery in itself. Like, how do you simulate that?
Yeah, that's a ton of processing power, even for a super advanced civilization. It makes you think like, why even bother? What would be the point of simulating us?
And that actually brings up another argument against the simulation, the idea that even if we are in a simulation, we can't actually know anything about the real world outside of it. We'd be stuck in our little digital world,
Yeah.
like fish in a bowl. We couldn't really understand what's truly out there beyond the simulation.
So even if we found some crazy glitch and we're like, aha, we're in a simulation,
Right.
we'd still have no clue what's really real.
That's the dilemma, yeah. And then there's the get a life argument, which a lot of people bring up. It's not really a direct argument against the simulation idea itself, but
Yeah.
it's more like, are these questions really the best use of our time and energy?
Like maybe we should focus on solving problems in the real world instead of going down these philosophical rabbit holes.
Yeah, there are definitely plenty of pressing issues that need our attention. But for the sake of our deep dive today, let's say for a minute that we are in a simulation. What would that mean for us? Could we break free? And would we even want to?
Okay, I'm game. So let's pretend we are just lines of code in some giant computer program. Could we like hack our way out? Like Neo in the Matrix, take the red pill and escape.
Well, that's where it gets really tricky. The paper actually mentions that Bostrom himself thinks breaking out is super unlikely. He says the simulators could easily just change the rules of the game. Or even, like, mess with our memories to stop us from getting too close to the truth.
So even if we thought we were about to break through, it could all just be another layer of the simulation to keep us trapped.
Exactly. And even if we did somehow manage to escape, who knows what we'd find on the other side? Would it be some kind of higher reality? Or something so weird that we couldn't even understand it?
Maybe we'd just end up in another simulation, like those Russian nesting dolls. But the paper does bring up a really interesting point. If we are in a simulation, what does that tell us about the beings who created it? Are they like benevolent overlords? Or are we just lab rats in some cosmic experiment?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And unfortunately, we just don't know. The paper even jokes that maybe it's just some bored teenagers from a higher-level simulation, creating our reality for their own entertainment.
So we could all be characters in some intergalactic video game. That's both hilarious and kind of terrifying.
Okay.
Okay, but let's shift gears for a sec. If we knew W for sure that we were living in a simulation, wouldn't that totally change how we live our lives?
That's a deep question. Would knowing our reality is fake make our choices, our relationships, our whole experience of life less meaningful?
Yeah, like if someone could just hit pause or delete on our whole existence, does anything we do even matter?
Even Bostrom says it shouldn't really change how we behave. The experiences we have, the emotions we feel, the connections we make, those are all real to us, whether we're made of flesh and blood or lines of code.
So it's kind of like the platform doesn't really change the content of our lives?
Exactly. We still have to figure out how to live in the world, make choices, find meaning, all
Oh.
within whatever reality we're given. And think about it. We already live with limits, right? We have laws, social norms, things we just can't do. So whether those limitations are from a simulator or from the laws of physics, it might not actually change how we live all that much.
I see what you mean. But it's still kind of a freaky thought. It makes you question, like, do we really have free will? Do our choices even matter if someone else is controlling everything?
It definitely brings up some big philosophical questions.
Hmm?
But even if our universe is a simulation, that doesn't mean we don't have an impact on each other,
Hmm.
or that our choices don't matter within that framework.
So even someone else is pulling the strings, we can still dance.
Exactly. And maybe the most interesting part of all this is we might never know for sure. There might not be any way to prove or disprove the simulation hypothesis. It could just be a mystery, something that makes us question reality but never get a real answer.
Okay, I have to ask though, if we can't know for sure, are there any clues we could look for? Any signs that might point to us being in a simulation?
That is the question, isn't it? And the paper points out that finding real proof is super hard because anything we might think is evidence could also just be a random event or something weird that happens naturally in the universe.
So even if we saw something totally bizarre, we couldn't rule out that it's just a really weird coincidence.
Pretty much, yeah. It's
So-
like trying to find a needle in a haystack, except the haystack is the entire universe and we
Mhm.
don't even know what the needle looks like. It's possible that the simulators made things so that any glitches are really subtle, so we could just explain them away with our current understanding of physics or chalk it up to our imagination.
Okay, but what about the scientists who are trying to find tiny problems with the laws of physics? The paper mentions something about cosmic rays.
Right. There are some physicists who believe that if our universe is simulated, there might be very slight differences in how the basic laws of physics work, and we might be able to detect those differences. The paper you mentioned talks about a study by Bean, Devoody, and Savage. They suggest looking for weird patterns in the energies of cosmic rays.
So maybe we could find some hard evidence hidden within reality itself.
It's a long shot, but it's something scientists are actually working on. Who knows what we might discover in the future? It's an exciting area of research, for sure.
So maybe one day we'll have a definite answer. But until then, I guess we're just left wondering, do you think we're living in a simulation?
To be honest, I don't know. And after all this discussion, I'm not even sure it matters that much.
Wait, you're saying this whole mind-blowing question of whether reality is even real, it doesn't matter?
I think the important part is the exploration itself. The simulation hypothesis makes us think about some of the biggest questions we can ask. about who we are, what reality is, what it means to be human. Whether we actually get a definitive answer is almost beside the point.
So it's more about the journey than the destination.
Exactly. It's about opening our minds and learning more about the universe, even if we never have all the answers.
I like that. It's definitely a more optimistic way to look at it.
It lets us appreciate the mystery, the awe, the possibility that we might be part of something way bigger and more complex than we ever imagined, without getting too hung up on finding certainty.
Well said. So for our listeners who are now staring at their hands and wondering if they're just pixels, what's the takeaway here?
The simulation hypothesis is a super interesting and thought-provoking idea. But at the end of the day, it's still just speculation. We don't have any solid evidence to prove or disprove it.
But even just thinking about these ideas can help us understand ourselves and the universe better. It's like a workout for our brains, you know?
Absolutely. And if you're interested in learning more, I highly recommend checking out that list of resources at the end of the Who's Pulling Our Wires paper. There's a ton of information out there to explore.
And hey, if you happen to find any glitches in the matrix, be sure to let us know. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep an open mind to all the possibilities of reality, simulated or not.
It's like we're trapped in this little digital fishbowl, and we can't really see the bigger picture. Like, we can't really know what's outside the simulation, even if it is a simulation.
So even if we find like a huge glitch, we're all, oh my God, we're in a simulation. We
Yeah.
still won't know like what's actually real.
Yeah, that's the thing. And then there's this other critique people bring up, the get a life argument. It doesn't really say the simulation is wrong or anything, but it's like, are we really using our time wisely by thinking about this?
Like maybe we should be focusing on like real world problems instead of these crazy philosophical questions.
Exactly. There are so many important things happening in the world that need our attention. But for the sake of our deep dive today, let's just pretend for a second that we are living in a simulation. What would that mean? Could we escape? Would we even want to?
Okay, I'm in. Let's say we are just lines of code in some massive computer program. Could we hack our way out? Like Neo in the Matrix, take the red pill and escape.
That's when things get really complicated. The paper mentions that Bostrom thinks escaping is almost impossible because the simulators could just change the rules whenever they want, or even like erase our memories so we don't figure things out.
So we could think we're about to break free and it's all just another part of the simulation.
Exactly. And even if we did somehow escape, who knows what we'd find? Would it be some higher level of reality? Or something so strange we couldn't even comprehend it?
Whoa, maybe we just end up in another simulation, like those Russian nesting dolls. Okay, but the paper brings up something really interesting. If we are in a simulation, what does that tell us about the ones who made it? Are they like good overlords or are we just experiments to them?
That's the big question, isn't it? And the truth is, we just don't know. The paper even suggests, maybe as a joke, that our simulation was created by bored teenagers from a higher level of reality, just for fun.
So we're all just characters in some intergalactic video game. Okay, that's kind of funny, but also scary. But hold on, let's change gears a bit. If we make me W, for sure we were living in a simulation, wouldn't that completely change how we live?
That's a really profound question. Would knowing that everything is fake make our choices and relationships and experiences less meaningful?
Yeah, like if someone could just press pause or delete on our whole existence, does anything we do even matter?
You know, Bostrom actually says it shouldn't really change how we behave. The experiences we have, the emotions, the connections, those are all real to us, whether we're made of atoms or code.
So the platform doesn't really change the content, right?
Exactly. We still have to navigate life, make choices, find meaning, all within the rules of our reality, whatever that reality is. And think about it. We already have limitations in our lives, like laws, social norms, things we just can't do. So whether those limitations come from a simulator or from the laws of physics, it might not actually change how we live all that much.
I see what you're saying,
Yeah.
but it's still a pretty unsettling thought. It makes you question if we really have free will. Like, do our choices even matter if someone else is controlling everything?
Definitely brings up some big philosophical questions. But even if our universe is a simulation, it doesn't mean we don't have an impact on each other, or that our choices don't matter within that simulation.
So even if someone else is pulling the strings, we can still dance.
I like that. Precisely. And maybe the most fascinating part of all this is that we may never know for sure. There might not be a way to prove or disprove the simulation hypothesis. It could just be a mystery, something that makes us question everything. But we might never get a real answer. It's kind of like, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. It's if the haystack is the whole universe and we don't even know what the needle looks like, The simulators could have made things so that any glitches are so small that we could just explain them away with, like, our current understanding of physics. Or just think we're imagining things.
Okay, but what about the scientists who are like trying to find tiny inconsistencies in the laws of physics? The paper mentioned something about cosmic rays.
Yeah, there are some physicists who think that if the universe is a simulation, there might be tiny differences in how the laws of physics work, and we might actually be able to measure those differences. The paper you sent talked about a study by Bean, Davuti, and Savage. They suggested looking for strange patterns in the energies of cosmic rays.
So maybe we could actually find some hard evidence, like hidden within reality itself.
It's definitely a long shot. But it's something scientists are actually looking into. Who knows what we'll find in the future? It's pretty exciting.
So maybe someday we'll have a real answer. But until then, I guess we're left with the mystery. So what do you think? Do you think we're living in a simulation?
Honestly, I have no idea. And after talking about it all, I'm not even sure it matters as much as we might think.
Wait, so you're saying this whole mind-blowing question about whether reality is even real doesn't matter?
I think the value is in the exploration itself. Thinking about the simulation hypothesis forces us to confront these huge questions about what it means to be human, about the nature of reality, about our place in the universe. Finding a definite answer is almost beside the point.
So it's about the journey, not the destination.
Exactly. It's about opening our minds and trying to understand the universe better, even if we never have all the answers.
I like that. That's a much more optimistic way of thinking about it.
It lets us embrace the mystery and the awe. The possibility that we're part of something much bigger and more complex than we ever imagined, without getting stuck on needing to know for sure.
That's beautifully put. So for everyone listening who's now staring at their hands like, wait, are these pixels? What's the takeaway here?
I'd say the simulation hypothesis is a super interesting and thought-provoking idea, but it's still just speculation. There's no real proof either way.
But thinking about these ideas can help us understand ourselves and the universe better. It's like a good mental workout.
Absolutely. And if you're interested in learning more, I definitely recommend checking out all those resources. At the end of Who's Pulling Our Wires? There's a ton of info out there to dive into.
And hey, if you find any glitches in the matrix, let us know. Until next time, keep those questions coming, keep exploring, and keep an open mind to all the possibilities, simulated or not.